stream just yet, please get in there now. I'm going to be shutting down the Discord stream, and we'll be doing the stream through my Twitch. So check the classroom chat for the Twitch link. Go here, please, and we'll be getting started shortly. Iniri asked in classroom chat in Discord is, hi, I'm new. Is today's class something I can pick up, or should I wait for the next class? Today's is going to be open for all levels. We're doing an overview analysis of some Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animatics and boards and scenes. We're going to be going over how to apply some of the principles we've gone over previously, but this is open to any skill level because it's good to get exposed to this kind of stuff and maybe try practicing and get some drawing mileage learning from it. So what I'm going to have people doing is be ready to draw. We're going to be doing kind of like gestural studies of some of the poses in this. We're going to be doing compositional studies of the perspective lines and other things in these. We are also going to go through these, and two things we're going to pay attention to. We're going to pay attention to finding the story beat in each of these scenes or shots, and we're also going to be paying attention to how things cut, like how things transition from shot to shot. For example, on this scene right here, we can play it in context. The cut occurs here when Raphael, I believe, is recoiling backwards, swinging his arm backwards, and kind of rebalances himself by punching his other fist down to the ground here in this kind of battle stance. So the cut actually occurs on the action here and carries the momentum of the previous shot. That's an example of the kind of stuff we're going to be looking for. We're also going to be searching for what the beat is of each of the scenes. The beat is what is the simplest action to describe the scene. Some of these will be a little bit more challenging to figure out where the beat is than others, because some of these are very transitionary movements that have more than one thing going on in them. But we'll take a look at how we can work that out for study purposes. Things I want people to pay attention to is how characters are placed and how they plant their legs. How these very, very simple, gesturally drawn characters place their legs on the perspective grid. This perspective grid and the way this is drawn, it's very loose, but it's functional. The actual show is going to use this as a guideline for how it designs its backgrounds and how the animation is placed. These kinds of boards are very, very animator oriented. They even have the camera moves for what's happening built in here. I don't have a comparison between the final animatic and this shot to show the difference between these two handy, but the animators at Flying Vark often use the storyboards basically as almost like rough animation. Not always, but these are notably very elaborate storyboards for being storyboards. This is approaching heavy into animation territory for a lot of these. This looks like a WebGen Sakuga animation thing, basically. You could potentially make something like this yourself solo, if you get the chops up for it. Very, very simply drawn characters and using rules of perspective and figure drawing and action and so on. But yeah, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at this stuff, but first things first, I want to go over some principles here. few things I want people to pay attention to is one, finding the story beat. What we're looking for, and by the way, I've linked the Sakugaburu shot that we're using so you can download it into the art application of your choice, right here, or the sequence right here. It's in the Discord chat. I'll also link it in Twitch chat. Number 2. Transitions. And number 3, star people. And number 4, perspective. Or dynamic perspective, actually. Dynamic perspective. These are 4 of the areas we're going to be paying close attention to today. The main ones we're going to be paying attention to are these 2. These ones are kind of secondary, but I will go over these a bit. So the dynamic perspective stuff, I'll be making note of that stuff as we go through the shot, because there are grids and stuff built in with in the shots with like sky grids and floor grids and stuff, and then in various like 1-point and 2-point perspective, depending on the shot. We'll look for those, and we'll note how it modifies how the characters look. The other thing I want people to thing that I want people to pay attention to in this is the principle of using what they often refer to in storyboards as star people. Star people in action boards are where you kind of draw characters, sort of like characters and poses, kind of like this. These are very, very simple, simplified poses of characters that are drawn very, very quickly. But like all the information of the pose is conveyed through it. You still follow the rules of figure drawing when doing these. These are just like a shorthand to create poses and to work out shots and stuff. There's a lot of this kind of stuff going on in a lot of these Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles boards. Like for time purposes, you can't like draw like a full on model character and stuff. You have to like really drastically simplify. And you can see that going on in the Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles boards that are playing up in the corner there. Those characters are very simple. You can see stuff like, you might see things that are important to the scene and then like facial expressions or something. And you might see like key parts of their bodies more elaborately drawn out for some shots, like if the hand is relevant to the pose in the shot, they'll do more of a detailed hand, and so on. But we'll take a look at some of those. But like the star people principle is a time-saving technique. It's not lazy. It uses the rules of figure drawing that you should be practicing in longer poses and in gesture drawing courses. Like built into these guys are like the mileage that you put into your understanding of the human figure, or animals if you're doing animals characters in your board or whatever. There's animal versions of this kind of thing as well. But I want people to get used to the idea of like drawing very, very simple character poses that describe the action. Like on Wednesday, remember we did that gesture drawing class that I was running, and for the way, and if you notice, the way I was drawing was like very, very, very simple. Like something like this might be like a ballet pose. Just add another leg there. Like those same kind of principles of gesture drawing apply to finding and creating poses for your action storyboards. So we're going to be practicing some of that today. Some of this is going to be application of figure drawing. Don't worry if you don't have that much mileage in figure drawing. This is a way to kind of have some fun, loosen up, and see how this stuff gets applied into really dynamic action shots. Like, I want people to kind of start vibing with the rhythm of how these how the mechanics of these boards work. So, all right. So those are the two things I want. So the star people. Those are the two secondary things I want people paying attention to. Star people and dynamic perspective, and these both play off each other because you're going to be, the perspective grids are going to be influencing your star people all over the place, and you better get used to using them. So finding the story beat and transitions are the two main primary things that we're going to be paying attention to. Finding the story beat means figuring out what the most simple version of the act, the most simple distilled version of what's happening in the scene. Oftentimes, like when story artists are trying to work out story beats, they'll often do something like this. Like, let's pretend you got a script over here. This character does this, and this character does this. So, for this sequence right here, you've got about 3 different scenes where different things are happening. There's this character right here. I'll just make a little stick figure. It's got some dialogue here. There's another character in the foreground here who's talking here. Suddenly an explosion happens. And the next scene is the characters reacting to the explosion. So this is action to action right here, and we could break these down further, but in terms of being basic story beats, this is a beat, this is a beat, this is a beat. You could even say that these two are separate beats for the dialogue beats. But in each of these, this is the simplest version of the action that's occurring, basically. Like, you might have a sequence, for example, let's pretend you have a sequence that calls for a really elaborate sword fight. There might be about three or 5 or 6 different actions the characters take running across the frame or something, but then there's to kind of establish things, when you're kind of working out stuff, you might just draw 2 characters, two characters crossing swords and glaring at each other or something. What if that's what it calls for? We might draw some kind of almost comic book sort of thing of characters standing across from each other, swinging weapons. I'm just doing stick figures right now, for example, swinging their weapons at each other. That guy's got a sword. This guy's got a sword too. And then there's another character looking on right here and reacting to what's happening. So this would not necessarily be one shot, but this is a story beat of something that's happening. From this, you can break it down into you can break things down further into what's happening. These characters might start somewhere over here and then move their duel over this way, and then the camera kind of moves over and center and like zooms in on this guy who's reacting to the fight, something like that. And these characters do like a bunch of elaborate actions. They clash, they struggle, but it's all happening in the same scene with different actions and stuff. So when you're breaking down your script for your boards, you usually start with the biggest idea first, before you kind of elaborate into different actions and maybe insert addition. Like there's no like set rules per se on how you break it down. Like you might decide, like I might decide something like this. For this right here, these two characters, it might be like this character's here. He's leaning against a wall. Takes a drag of a cigarette. Puffs out the cigarette. Waits there with the cigarette in his hand. And then he says his dialogue. And the camera kind of cuts to him saying the dialogue some more in close up. Maybe he's got the cigarette on screen right here, the lit cigarette in the foreground, something like that. And then takes another drag of the cigarette. We cut back here again. Second on the cigarette. Don't smoke, by the way, kids. Blows out some more smoke. And also the way I've drawn with like really super crude stick figures, this can literally be like the first thing when you're trying to work out an idea. You don't give a shit about how good or bad it's drawn. You're just trying to work out how you might do the action. You can make pretty drawings out of it later, or more elaborate storyboarding drawings out of it later. The idea is to just get down the idea that you're going for as quickly as possible, like almost playing a film in your head. And the film that you see in your head, you have to be able to draw very quickly and not care about detail. You're going for, like, I can picture in my head how this might look with a well-drawn character in a well-rendered scene with a well-rendered backdrop. It's just because I've seen enough films like of how something like this might look. And so on this one, then this character comes into the foreground right here, the corner. This character turns his head and reacts to him. This character starts talking. Get an extreme close-up of that character's mouth who's talking right now. Maybe like a medium shot of the smoking character as he's listening to the other guy. And he kind of turns his head up, like he's kind of thinking about what he's saying or something. And then that was all taken from this basic idea and just extrapolated on. I added a bunch of different cuts, so this is actually like here. So in terms of being like an animated film, that's one scene. This is one scene. This is one scene. That's one scene. And that's one scene. Now, if we were to take this further into the other story beats that we had, like after this sequence, the next beat would be the setup for the explosion. And there might be additional stuff for that. Like I might show what's exploding first before it goes off. But this is like a way to break down stuff and start like basically making a film. This is how you start making your film. This is the film right here as it's starting to develop. Like taking the actions of the characters, the actions of the scene and what's happening, and figuring out what happens in each moment on paper, and planning out. You can planning out to the point where you can visualize how the film looks in your head, and from what you've written and drawn. And the more used to, that's why I think it's really important actually for people who are just starting to get into animation or filmmaking in general to make very short films yourself and finish them. Because once you walk through the process of creating a film, you can visualize the end point of where this stuff is going a lot easier. Additionally, like it doesn't have to be a film that you do make entirely solo, mind you. Like you can do it collaborating with other people. But being able to like see the process of how it fits together from start to finish, and getting mileage in figuring that stuff out and doing it yourself is really invaluable. So I'm going to be giving people some tools of how to like plan this kind of stuff a little bit today. We're going to be looking at Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles today, trying to figure out where the story beats are, what are happening in the shots, but then we'll also see how they broke those story beats down and into the actions that went into the shots. Mind you, the actions that are happening on screen here are very close to animation. Like most storyboards aren't like as elaborately drawn like this. It's just for the type of show that Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is. It really is in the benefit of the pipeline of animation that the storyboard artists are essentially rough animators. So the other thing we're going to be looking at is transitions. Like how does stuff cut between shots? There's several different principles of this. Like there's like experimental film techniques too that get really crazy about how stuff cuts and transitions. We're going to I'm not going to go into too much detail onto the different types of transition, but we're going to keep an eye out for them, and I'll make a note of them as we go through the stuff that we're going to be studying today. Fortunately, most of the cuts in this are cut on action, which is very common for, you'll see it even in like kung fu films and action films. Cutting on action is a big thing. There's also different ways that you can cut on action. Like for example, this close-up here, there's a starburst that happens on screen. It is a cut on action, but it's a very stylized action that makes a transition out of this kind of stylized graphical element that would flash on screen, and then transition to the next scene here with the characters clashing their weapons together. And cutting on action just happened two more times here. I made a note of this one earlier where Raphael getting knocked off balance there and recovering. Like the transition happens and continues the momentum of the action. He's going in that direction, if you notice. He's going in that direction. In the next shot, he's still going in that direction. The camera position has changed, but the audience is not going to get visually confused about what's happening in this shot from the last one, because it continues on the action. It trips him up, falls down. And same idea here, look. So this character is positioned on the left side of the screen, Raphael's positioned on the right. Even though the camera angle changes completely here, the angle still the angle of the camera chosen here, it still has a composition where Raphael is on the right and the sword that's coming down on him is on the left. So we're still able to, even though there's all this crazy action happening, it's still planned out in a way that visually isn't too hard to follow. So then there's this here. Let me see what it looks like in context and motion here. Alright, so what's happening here is the bad guy hooks his weapon into like what Raphael's using to guard himself. I think that's like a wrist brace or something. But the way it transitioned, it does another transition on action here. Raphael reacts to, whoops, oh dear. He gets actually yoinked off camera, like down and slightly to the right. And if you notice, Raphael's getting thrown slightly to the right and down here. Down towards the camera this time, though. But it is continuing the action in a way that still makes visual sense. He actually started down and slightly to the right, and then he started curving to the left, it looks like. So it's like this cool curve for the next action, changing the momentum of the action that's happening. And then the transition that happens here, there's like it looks like there's almost kind of a camera move where like camera's blurring here from like being whipping over to the side, and then if there's a cut that occurs that brings us to Donatello, who deploys his staff in this shot. That one's a really interesting. This one's a really interesting transition right here because it's literally a cut on a camera move instead of just an action. Because the action is like resolved itself here, but the camera is like moving off to go somewhere else, basically. It's really nice. But here in this shot, what I was talking about with star people, that's what's going on here. These are very, very rough and loose. This is somebody who understands like the rules of figure drawing, but they're like being really, really like loose with it to get just get the dynamic feel of the action out. This is actually not far from like how animators will often do like first pass thumbnails and stuff, or rough animators will start a scene. Even though this is a storyboard, this is very close to rough animation. So you don't necessarily have to go this rough with your storyboard. I mean, this over elaborate in your animation with your storyboards. But that's what these types of shows do, or this particular show. Because I've seen a lot of action shows that don't go this elaborate. Yeah, there's lots of good meaty stuff in it. Let's take a look at one segment maybe to do a study from in this. Let's pick a nice nice scene that kind of encompasses maybe multiple things of what I'm talking about, or focuses on one particular thing. Alright, so we'll try our hand at maybe somewhere in here, first off. See if we can pick a moment. Actually, maybe let's pick a little simpler shot here. Maybe towards the beginning. Alright, so we'll use this shot first off. Alright, so just blank this out. I'll bring it up on mine. Actually, yeah. So, for those of you who are following along at home, please get the shot from Sakugaburo. I have posted it in chat. Please let me know if you need to repost it, or people please repost it for others who have just joined us, especially if they're in Twitch. and not in the Discord. But you should be... Oh, that is not the same shot, is it? Oh dear. I uploaded the wrong thing, I think. Wait, no, this is it. Yeah, this is it. Okay, cool. Alright. So, so there's a few things I want people to pay attention to what's happening here with. First off, is essentially first pay attention to actually what is happening here. So, what's happening here is Raphael is kind of regaining his balance from the last scene when he got his hand knocked back by the villain. He tries to escape. Villain uses his weapon to trip him up. He falls flat on his face. And then the villain, while Raphael is turning around to guard himself, the villain takes a big downward swing at him, and it cuts to him guarding. So, if we were to summarize this as one beat, we could probably summarize it as like this moment here, I would say. The trip up. But if we wanted to break it down further, it could be this moment here, too. So essentially those are two beats, I would say. Like that's a beat, that's a beat, and that's a beat. And let's say that that's probably a beat, too. So we'll start with this one here. Get ready to draw, but try to replicate what's happening in this beat. So I'm going to start off by establishing a perspective grid using the line tool here. I'm going to copy this perspective grid that the story artist used and made for themselves. So this is a 1-point perspective grid for this particular shot. It looks like. I don't think that these other lines are going to a vanishing point. At least not that I can immediately tell. Actually, they might be. Here, let's find out, actually. So that. Yeah, actually, no, this is a 2-point shot. So, and we can find about where the vanishing point is by drawing over these lines and then to the horizon. So it should be just about there-ish. This isn't perfect perspective, but it's like close enough for the board artist to work with. So I'll just draw over the lines that they made. But yeah, be aware of that. That is 2-point perspective happening right there. I think there's another grid line going back here too. So maybe I'll make another drawing layer in this so I can separate it from the perspective line. Alrighty. So, you also notice in these boards to make more sense of the characters are color coded. This villain character is color coded pink back there. Raphael, of course, his predominant color is red. So in the boards, the animatic artists and storyboard artists draw him red, and Donatello, same thing. They color code him purple. It's easier to tell which characters are which when you're drawing like these super rough characters, when you have little tricks like that. Like this is Michelangelo here because he's orange, and there's Leonardo who's blue. The villains, for the most part, the different villains seem to be color coded pink. With some exceptions, there's some ones here where they use black lines. They might have chosen to use black lines here because it's easier to tell the difference between Donatello. Donatello's purple and pink, but I mean, whatever like makes it clear what you're looking at. Like I can tell in an instant because of the color coding and so on, and also the posing in general. Because this still kind of looks like one of the turtles. I can instantly tell what's going on here and who's being attacked. If I knew the context of the episode as one of the crew members working on the shot, I would probably know who these characters were too, even though they're not really elaborately drawn. There's occasional details on them. Those look like some henchgoon characters for the episode. Those are being noted in the shot notes. But anyway, here's our big boy. So, what I'm going to get out of this is I want to pay attention to the basic gesture of the character when I do this draw over, and how the board artist kind of used the created the dynamic pose here, because the board artist is the one who's in these action show who creates these poses. They're designing the action that is going to be used as a riffing tool or a guideline for the animators to work with. So if you notice some of the ways they simplified it, here let's take a look at Raphael's character model right here. Raphael model sheet horizon. I don't think we'll be able to find a straight up model sheet for Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh, here's one. Oops, that's really poor resolution, but you can see like there's quite a bit of detail in him compared to the boards, obviously. But these characters are still like very flexible, even though they're like heavily stylized and they do have a considerable amount of like design detail in them. So thinking of them initially in like really simplistic terms is what drives the design of the character model. Like the animators actually, aside from shots where they use the Harmony puppets more for consistency, the animators on Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tend to have a lot of freedom with how they draw the characters. So these are like these would be like more like keyframe animation poses from the show, I would say. But we see like Raphael here. He's described with really big shapes, really big simple shapes. Like the artist takes his head and breaks it down into like these really simple shapes, like the lower part of his jaw across, so we know like what direction his head is, or what's tilted up or down. In this case, it's tilted downwards from that little eye line that's there. He omitted facial expressions on this shot because the facial expressions aren't really important for this. He used additional stuff of like he has like a simplified version of his shell design on his back, because like Raphael's back. I'm just going to throw this in here. Raphael's back is kind of works like this. Like here's his shoulders right here. So we have this kind of cube for the top of his body. You almost want to say. And then we have like this ridge of shell that's over his back, almost like kind of a backpack. And there's a particular way it's designed. I wish I had a full turnaround handy of him, but the way that the story artist simplified this for his own personal reference is there's a big triangular shape right here, and then there's two ridges on either side, kind of need to draw behind him a bit, but yeah, you get the idea. And they just use that to basically kind of track his back a little bit easier visually. because it's an important part of his design. It's going to stick out a lot when he goes into different poses, so it's worth including. The artist didn't even bother to draw you notice they didn't even bother to draw the feet or the hands. We kind of know that what's happening here is a balled fist. If Raphael was palming the ground, we might see something like this. Or the animator might make it a palm on the ground for this. But from how the board artist drew this, it looks like a fist. And how the final animated shot looks might be different. Like the animator might actually use a palm instead of a fist. I think fist looks cooler though. It makes him look more like he's ready to turn around and fight. But yeah, even though the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have really, really big, especially Raphael, he's got massive feet if you look at those right there. They omitted it on this board because it's not necessary for this shot. You've got the basic character model, mostly kind of occupying roughly the volume space that you need him to occupy, and you know how his feet are drawn, so you don't really need to draw it for this shot where it's not really important. It's gonna save you more time to leave those out instead of having to really put that in there. But again, doing these tricks are not lazy. These artists turn these boards over relatively quickly, and they have to be economical about how they're doing them. But yeah. So, we'll go further along in the board and take a peek at some of the other stuff that's going on here. Alrighty. So on this shot right here, actually I'm going to use this one because I like this pose a little better to kind of learn something from. So, let's note a few things. First off, the artist who did this, they might have done rough line of action stuff or something like that, and it might have been super scribbly or something like that when they first did this and scribbled it out and stuff. But what they did for the animatic was they probably went back through and did a quickie clean version or something like that, or they thumbnailed it out beforehand so they kind of knew what was going and stuff, and then they have enough experience so that drawing something like this straight out of their pencil isn't as much of a problem. They might have just gone straight into drawing this because they kind of know how the line of action works here. They kind of use this right here on the center line of the shell here as a little quickie, super quick drawn guideline, and so on. And it's all following the rules of figure drawing that we've been going over in my figure drawing class too. So, you can see there's foreshortening happening on the limbs and stuff, and it's it's not overly drawn though. It's handled really with simplicity. That we can tell that fist is pointed towards us, his bicep is bending, and his forearm is pointing towards us in that pose. It kind of even feels even though there's not a facial expression here, it looks like it could be plausible that he's gone like this. Now that's something that they might actually add to in the animation phase later, but sometimes you don't really need to do every elaborate detail in the storyboarding phase. Just get the big stuff for the main stuff in the shots that's working. There's little nitty-gritty things that can be added in the animation phase sometimes that just come out through discovery. Maybe let's try and pose this a little bit differently from how it was in the boards. And getting back to our rules of perspective, you can tell that Raphael here is in fact following the rules of perspective. You could seriously like put a box around him, around his body, and contain him inside of it in perspective, something along these lines. I think his arm would be sticking out a little bit of that box, but you can think of him in terms of occupying 3D space. Like, he's got volume that's coming towards us and moving away from us, like with this leg back here. We're seeing the underside of his shell tilted towards us. We're actually seeing more of the underside. We're actually seeing more of the top of his shoulders tilted towards us a little bit. Yeah. Oops. Let's take a look at the villain back here. He's also heavily following the rules of perspective on that sword. So everyone who's in here should be trying to draw along. If you can import this scene file from Sakugaburo into your drawing program of choice to draw over the top of, that would be the best way to analyze these. But if you can't, you can play and pause the video even without necessarily downloading it. Just do it directly through Sakugaburo, and then you can either use digital or traditional to kind of like analyze what's going on here. Like pay attention to and try to replicate some of the foreground. Look for like the simple lines of action that are happening here. Like, I don't necessarily want you to copy exactly the way the board artist drew things, but I want you to kind of analyze the action of what's happening a bit, sort of like what I'm doing here. And maybe try and drawing a slightly more elaborate figure than he drew, or he or she, whoever drew this board, made. Kind of pay attention to the rules of figure drawing and rules of perspective that were used in this shot to make this really dynamic pose, and do it in a really simple way. So I want people to kind of wrap their heads around about how to like take what they're learning in figure drawing and perspective and simplify it for rough animation and for dynamic storyboards like these. Because it's not necessary to go over elaborate with your rough animation. And the goal here of doing this study that we're doing is to kind of analyze how these things are working, so we can, in like kind of like slow motion almost, so we can kind of wrap our heads around the decisions and the quick shorthand that the storyboard artists use to describe these really elaborate actions. So a lot of this is really just vibing. So in this shot, because the facial expression is really important, I was talking on the previous one like how it looks like he's almost like bugging out, mouth open. They chose to do it here. So in this shot here, probably in terms of the show, like they didn't do his expression, but maybe he's like kind of like something. The story artist chose to emphasize his facial expression, to put in his facial expression at this point, because it's important. Seeing his reaction is important for this moment. So we can kind of guess that whatever expression he had here is a kind of a neutral expression that might have worked in setting up what's happening here. Also, just a note, so what's happening? So like, what's happening here? That's a key pose. Something like this would be what you call an animation in anticipation. Like, he's anticipating the next action. He's like going down here, scrunching his head down. You can even see like the head moving down a little bit, the body shifting and stuff. And he's launching himself, or trying to get into the next action to get away from the bad guy. Yoink. The bad guy even has a kind of anticipation too, if you look for it here. So the bad guy's almost kind of anticipating there a bit. And he pushes the sword in here, out to this action here. I would say that you can almost think of this as almost an anticipation for the sweep of the leg too. The bad guy, of course, is swinging a big heavy sword, so he has, after completing this action, he has a bit of an anticipation too, before he swings down here. But yeah, so some more stuff about that I'm noticing about Raphael's model and how the story artist simplified things. Like, look at how the shell turns here. Yeah. So the way the artist is simplifying things, like the front of his shell body is like drawn like really, really simple, like a really basic suit of armor, kind of like this. That's probably it's probably how the other turtles might have their chests simplified in the rest of the show too. We'll keep an eye on look out for how the other characters are simplified. But you notice, like, there's that little kind of simplified version of the shell design. It's just enough for the board artist to kind of track what's going on with his silhouette. And if you notice, there's a center line over the bulge in his shell on his back here, which shows off his upper body volume here and the volume of his shell too. And what's happening right here is also an excellent example of the Star People principle. Like, this still incorporates like elements of Raphael's design, but look at that. Like, there's no feet drawn there, for example, because it's not important for this particular quickly drawn shot. There's no hands here. And this isn't lazy. I don't want people to look at this and consider it to be an easy way of getting out of having to draw hands and feet. This is somebody who understands how to draw hands and feet quite well, in fact. And we can tell that they know how to when we look at how he handled Raphael's hand here, for example. It's very, very simple and quick, but you can get a sense of the kind of block shape of the palm wedge. And the fingers and stuff. I mean, it's drawn like really quick, but it's still based on an understanding of how hands work, even though it is a two-fingered Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hand. Like, these artists aren't being lazy. These are functional tools of simplification to solve a problem. And the problem is, how's the pacing of this fight going to work? How's the actions going to lay out? Like, what's a rough pass? How it might be animated when it's finished, or that the animators can use as a really well thought out and almost kind of like animator-ish guideline for how the shot is handled. All right. So let's take a look at this. He's landing in perspective. It looks like one leg is up back there. And if you notice, it's the artist has omitted. Yeah, there we go. That's the thigh. That's the calf. But the artist has again omitted the foot for this. So not necessary for this particular shot, or this particular super quick drawing. But we can see that the artist still has a sense of perspective in what's going on here. Raphael's face kind of squished in the ground here. There's no center line drawn here, but the artist was able to use those eyes there to kind of tell us where the center line is. All you need is like just enough quickie shorthand in order to get the idea across. And again, like if you struggle with making figures like this out of like these really kind of contoury looking lines, you may not necessarily draw your storyboard characters like this. You probably might do something like this. Just like mask them out, scribble them out and stuff, and not like you might even like try like reposing them stuff, like maybe the leg was moved in different spots several times before you kind of figured out what would be a very good looking dynamic pose here or something like that. And of course that's not what actually winds up going into the clarified boards. Like you take that and then you'd like simplify it or something. Really depends though. Like if you're making storyboards for yourself, it's not always necessary to go that clean, like for your own personal short film stuff. But if you're making it for other people to read, like in a production pipeline or something, then you probably do want to clean up your boards. Being diligent about cleaning up your boards will also make you a great asset on a story team. Like it isn't enough for storyboard artists to make cool actions and stuff. You also got to clean up your boards a lot, and so that what you created, roughing out an idea, is something that the director or anyone else that the storyboard gets passed to will be able to read and understand. But when you're working out the guts and the nitty-gritty of what's actually happening, you can be like really scribbling rough and loose. You might have like shorthand notes on the side. You might be trying to work out little drawing things here and there. You might grab some reference that you're trying to like copy over or something. You get really elaborate with it if you need to for certain shots. But then what matters at the end of your storyboards, when you're communicating to the rest of the team, is something that is readable and communicates the idea. A storyboard is a tool. There's actually a lot of storyboards that are good enough to basically qualify as films themselves too. That's also why I'm showing people, right? That's also one of the reasons why I wanted to show people Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at some point, because the way they board is very close to Sakuga WebGen style animation, where it's very elaborate, sometimes almost like stream of consciousness-y looking, really super rough, loose, super dynamic animation. It's done very quickly, and like in terms of like budgetary cost for working out actions like these, like this costs relatively little to work out versus doing like something involved, because like the show that the Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a Harmony puppet based show. Although the way they use the puppets in the pipeline involves a lot of hand-drawn animation. But the character designs, if you notice up here, are pretty elaborate, relatively speaking. They have very stylized rules for how they're designed, and they have a considerable amount of detail for what they are. So working out stuff as loosely as possible, like even in the boarding phase, like we're seeing here, will save a lot of time and money, and get and achieve like much more dynamic results for the endpoint. Like being an animator being presented something like this to riff off of is just like gold. Like I would be jazzed to like take something like this and try my best to capture the energy of it when I animate the characters, or go beyond it if I'm capable, or if I see an opportunity to. And that's the thing, like storyboarding and animation is very, I mean, there are different disciplines, but they are also, in terms of how a lot of productions can be very closely interconnected, definitely for TV animation. For feature film, it's a little bit more separated, but that's kind of changed. Especially in terms of like previs. Pre-visualization is a approach to filmmaking, is a tool in filmmaking that's used to basically like use like really cheap assets to basically make a low budget version of the film or the action scene that you're doing. One of the big pioneers of using computers and 3D in pre-visualization is, of course, The Incredibles by Pixar. And the 100-mile dash run, famous in the film. I'm probably going to try to avoid getting a copyright strike of some kind on this, but there's some stills from it here. But this entire scene, if you look on The Incredibles making of, is like a 3D animatic following basically like 2D hand-drawn characters, and he's running through like 2D hand-drawn environment stuff that's been like placed in the world. Like this is relatively cheaper to put together than like actually animating a real shot or something. Like being able to basically make the whole film or the whole TV episode super cheap to visualize what it's going to be like in the final version is what the purpose of pre-visualization is. And storyboards are part of that, part of that process, though not specifically part of pre-visualization. And in fact, previs is its own, especially in the special effects and movie industry, and of course the animation industry. Previs for feature film is and also television these days too, is its entire career path in and of itself. So I'm just gonna have some fun with this right here. Like I'm trying to like vibe with the shapes that were used to build Raphael here by the story artist a bit. Kind of thinking about like what the thought process was of the artist when they did this, because these are like really lovely abstract dynamic shapes, and I kind of want to pick up on some of this kind of stuff for my own work, and that's the point of doing these kinds of studies. So another thing that the board artist did here, if you notice, he used shadows on the ground plane, which of course are part of the shot. Like the only way that this would not be is if they're like in the story, for example, they're in an area that has no shadows under the characters. Or let's pretend that like the lighting in the scene, which is very important for the story, the lighting off Raphael needs to be like this. So then they might add that to the boards. They might even go a step further and like Raphael might be lit from behind here. If it's important to describe this in the board. Or they might use a single tone. I'm just doing it like almost kind of like how a lot of artists might do when they're just like powering through their boards, and they might go back and clean it up with a single tone, but I'm just like scribbling in where the shadows would be, just real quick. If that was if that was what was happening in the shot, and the shadows on Raphael were important to the shot. Yeah, I think we got enough out of this shot right here. I'm gonna maybe do a couple little quick gesture notes here on the posing of the characters for myself. Get this kind of like grid thing going there. So let's take a look at this transition here. We got the villain swinging his weapon in like a pretty wide arc right here. Looks like, and the arc actually travels off the screen, and it's going in perspective, really emphasizing the danger and the weight of this huge object that is like almost kind of like almost nearly dwarfing Raphael. This is a giant ass sword. Like, of course, a giant-ass sword would be a threat to a giant-ass turtle. I like how the villain right here, the story artist, incorporated a hip tilt and a shoulder tilt that are counterposed to each other there, kind of. There's a good feeling of him swinging the sword using the muscles of his legs to swing his upper body. It has a good feeling to me. So an animator doing this would definitely want to maybe track the arc of which the sword travels, depending on how many frames are being used or whatever. And if you notice on Raphael's arms again, I think if his hands were open and it was important to the shot, the artist would include the hands. But because they are probably balled fists for this scene here, yeah, it looks like it is on this scene here. Like his fist would probably be about here-ish. I think that's supposed to be his thumb right there. Yeah. Because his hands are fists here, the story artist just simplified it. Just omitted the hand. Bam. You notice this sword is even following like some perspective lines here. So this sword is got this perspective lines going there. We've got a floor grid that's visible, more visible when Raphael gets yanked off screen. There's a 2-point perspective floor grid, but this is actually a 3-point perspective shot. So we have a vanishing point going out over this way, right here. A vanishing point going out over way up here somewhere. So what's happening here is almost kind of a Dutch tilt. Something like this. The camera's tilted and the horizon line is like something like that. And in addition to that, let me maybe yoink. So this object right here is following the rules of 3-point perspective. The big sword that's crashing down on Raphael. And of course it changes direction because it's like tilting him up and back here. So its vanishing point essentially is turning with it like that. But you can even use that as a guideline for maybe like whatever kind of 3-point perspective might guide when they get to the animation phase. Whatever three-point perspective might guide or influence, potentially, how Raphael is drawn for this shot. So I'm going to copy-paste that in there. Make that red. Whoops. I made that red. Well, anyway, so we can maybe say the perspective, the three-point perspective line is somewhere. It's again, this is probably not perfect either, but it's probably somewhere down there-ish. I want to say maybe here or here. But that is basically a three-point perspective shot that's happening there. It's a really interesting one, emphasizing the tension of the moment of clashing with him. It makes sense why they would do it, because this is a big-ass weapon that's overpowering our hero. And you notice how the shot is composed. Our hero on one side, graphically framed by the sword that's covering up most of the frame here, threatening to completely overpower the hero. He's resisting it. It gets pushed back a little bit, but then it slides. Like the villain almost kind of like realizes the villain realizes that he can't like overpower Raphael with his guards up. So the villain improvises and thinks a step ahead of our hero, hooks his weapon into whatever this is. Him in Raphael's arm. And flips him over. So this is not a... That's kind of a cool moment. This is a very, very trained and smart fighter that can improvise that Raphael's up against. So here we go. Let's take a look at this transition here. So that's going to fill in here Raphael's body mass. So we get kind of a sense of how this transition is actually occurring. If you may notice, like that kind of shadow that's right there is following perspective line right there, and so is Raphael's body, for that matter. If you look for cues on how the story artist drew his body, you can track how the perspective was used on him. You can even get a sense of it here, even though he's going off screen. Okay, let's shade in that mass right here so we know where Raphael is and how much of the shot he's blocking off as the scene transitions. Just so we can kind of visualize like how this transition is happening. Yeah, he's wiped out of the frame, like so. Then the scene like whips over to Donatello, who's over here. And I'm going to need a short restroom break in a little bit, but I'll leave this on loop here while I hit the restroom real fast. Alright, and we're back. Let me just check. I'm going to put on some synthwave again. Alright. So, now that we take a look at that little scene there, let's take a look at another scene in this sequence. Maybe one of the other fights that's happening here. I think it would definitely be worth it to look at Donatello's kind of wind up here. And maybe some of this. This, of course, gets really elaborate because, just look at how. Actually, I'm gonna show real quick one of the other shots I found on Tsukugiburo. Let's see here. Whoops, that's not it. But one of the other shots I found on Tsukugiburo earlier. Here we go. Here we go. And this one is ridiculously animated. This is like a crazy amount of animation for being a storyboard. This is something that I would plausibly see short filmmakers posting stuff to their YouTube making with maybe slightly more drawn out backgrounds. But kept really rough so they aren't really that concerned with overdoing the models. You could make an entire film that looks basically like this, maybe with some somewhat better backdrops. It wouldn't take much. Get rid of this perspective grid, and then add in just enough of the flat color sets that you need, and fill in the characters. Any one of you here could make a short film kind of like this, and it would be very economical. Yeah, this is crazy cool. We might take more of a look at this shot a little later. Although this is heavily animator stuff going on here. This is an animator that's doing a storyboard, pretty much. And I'm actually interested in checking out more of this person's work to learn more about their stuff. Some of their finished shots in here too. But yeah, especially the stuff with the whip. That's just straight up animated right there. Alright, so let's pick some stuff from here to pick apart some more. See how much time we got. We've been at this for an hour and 20 minutes. It's pretty good. I'll give it at least another 40 minutes or so to kind of break some more of the stuff down. Ooh, this is really nice perspective in this shot here. Yeah, there's a lot of rules of perspective that needed to be kind of thought about for making this shot. Because check out what's happening here. So we get a transition of Donatello spinning his body. Look at how he's drawn. It's it looks like a bowling pin here. It's just literally just this with some lines over it to show that he's still rotating from the last scene. And the little head there. He looks like a bowling pin or I don't know, a shaving cream bottle or aerosol can or something. And look at how really simplistically that character's drawn. It's literally just It's literally just a circle head with and then this weapon right here is just a line in the circle. I mean, this goes to show you don't have to go super elaborate for a lot of stuff in your boards, as long as the action reads. This is probably the most elaborately drawn character in this shot. Like, you can see, the person who made this understands rules of figure drawing. There's a rib cage there. There is a center line on the back of the head there. There is a sense of the cheek and the side plane of the head there. This hand that's really loosely drawn, really scribblily drawn, still kind of feels like the basis for a hand. I think that some of this is supposed to be the pinky, but you could say some of this is like that kind of triangular wedge that's on the underside of the palm, maybe. There's an elbow right there. Like, and this was done really rough and loose. This is by somebody who understands figure drawing from doing lots and lots of figure drawing. They just used it like a quick shorthand for this. So clock in that mileage in figure drawing, and you'll be able to be more intuitive about the problem solving you need to do in your storyboards or your animation. Yeah. So what do we got in the background here of this, of the perspective grid that's behind us? This is going to be really important for this shot. So, got ourselves a vanishing point back here. It's kind of establishing the tight quarters that this fight almost looks like it's happening in a subway car or something. We got more grid lines going over here on the ceiling here. They're not being drawn out beyond this, but we can use this to find. We can use these to kind of find generally where the vanishing point is, somewhere over there. And in addition to that, whoops, let's put that in there. In addition to that, there are also indications that I'm seeing of some 3-point perspective going on here, from what I can tell. So the vanishing point for these would be like somewhere way up over here. I don't know. And it's not completely perfect, but it's close enough to get the problem solving that needs to be done in this shot done in a plausible way. The problem solving that needed to be solved in this shot is to do like a dynamically staged scene of Donatello expertly dodging and almost like jump roping and ducking. This whatever this weapon is, it looks like a ball and chain from how it's drawn here, but how the prop actually looks could easily be something else. Like this could be like a hook or something. Who knows? But we're able to glean from this what's happening quite clearly. In fact, like, I mean, is there any point in this when you can't really tell what's going on when you see it in sequence? I mean, if you saw it like this by itself, you might get kind of confused, but you can kind of tell what's going on. But if you see it in sequence, especially because this is very kind of an animator-oriented board, you definitely tell what's going on. I'd say you can kind of tell what's going on with this one. Like, you can tell Donatello is scrunched down there. You can tell that this dangerous thing is probably swinging over his head. You can tell this guy is probably ducking it too. And you can kind of tell that that's a figure. You can tell what he's doing with his staff here. Also, if you notice this right here, like, check this out. This kind of like simplified shape the artist has been using for whenever Donatello swings his staff around, like kind of a blur of his staff stretching out or whatever to indicate the staff rotating. Like this is actually following kind of perspective a bit. Like there's like you could almost have like an ellipse here. Sort of tracking this. I kind of look like it looks like almost kind of a meat cleaver for that shot. And the artist didn't like over elaborate. He didn't like draw in like his arm spinning the thing and stuff. No, all I did was just I just needed him standing there, and this is the space that he's occupying for this shot. The other important stuff is the stuff I need to concentrate on getting across for the board here. Like I trust the animator to be able to work out how to spin the staff. Look at that. It actually looks even more interesting when I did like the ellipse over it. See. Right. Well, we'll give this about, I want to say 25 to 30 more minutes of analysis here. But yeah, I mean, Donatello, by the way, for those who don't know, in terms of like the visual language they picked for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like Michelangelo is very circular. He's got like circle shapes and stuff. Especially you can see that in his head and like his kneecaps. Donatello is more of a square. You can see that in his boxy head. Pretty sure Leonardo was a triangle of some kind. I forget what Raphael is. I think he's a giant square. But I have to check on that. There's like a visual language that they came up with these characters for. These characters. And you can see when the story, and the reason I bring it up is you can see the story artist here did like basically a box for Donatello's head. You can see that at other points in the animatic, like when Donatello is on screen, usually the head is handled as in a very boxy way. Man, that's an elaborate fight right there. Oh, and I wanted to show you guys what the homework is. The homework is going to be kind of a cheat. I'm actually giving you the homework because this is our last week doing these storyboarding classes, at least for now. I may revise things, and because I really kind of enjoy doing this and breaking down storyboard art and animatics like these. So if we do another of these next week, I will announce it beforehand. But for this week, I'm actually going to show you the homework of some pals of mine that I want you to follow. Their names are Doig and Swifty, and they're the people who are going to be talking with Patrick Stannard at Powerhouse tomorrow about some very cool stuff, about Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stuff, the stuff that we're going over here. So that's why that's partly why I wanted to whet people's appetites to this show, so that people can start wrapping their heads around the problem solving that the artists have to go through to make these fight scenes a bit. So their weekly challenge, they do this weekly challenge here where you can upload your animation or your storyboarding animatic or whatever to get it critiqued by them. So this is entirely optional if you want to do this. Their challenge for this week, I think it's Fridays when they do the critique. I have to double check that, but it's either Fridays or Thursdays. I can't quite remember, but this week's is, even if you can't get it in on time, still I would suggest doing this. But this week, try to maybe challenge yourself and storyboard and create a storyboard animatic of a fight. And by animatic, I mean you create a storyboard and you basically like put it in timing, like you time it out how it would be as your actual film. And they have like some suggested storyboarding resources. So I'll link them in the classroom chat. and in Classroom Chat and Discord, and in my Twitch. There's additional stuff here. You can get this Gumroad here from a Craig in the Creek guy, I think. Well, no, that's not a Gumroad, but this is some stuff from Craig of the Creek's do's and don'ts of storyboarding that can maybe help orient you a little bit to some of the principles that we've gone over in previous classes and some of the ones that we touched on today a little bit. These are mostly about composition on this page. We've gone over, in a previous class, we've gone over the rule of thirds, and I've touched on the 180-degree rule. And I've always told you guys to include a ground or a sky plane. Always include the ground or sky plane when you're making your shots. That goes for both animation and for storyboarding, or most animation anyway, because you always want to have a sense of how your characters are placed in the world and what angle the camera is at. But yeah, these will definitely help you a little bit. Really cool information. For an explanation of grids and storyboarding. Oh, there's an Instagram here from Bridget Underwood. There's also some other stuff I'll try to link in Discord. Like, I found 2 free Gumroads recently that I'm gonna follow that for sure. I found 2 free Gumroads recently that are from some professional storyboard artists, where they give like free rules of storyboarding and free guides on storyboarding and stuff. Oh, here's one of them actually. Yeah, it's in this thread that I linked in chat. You can. Yeah, this is one of them. There's another one that I will also try to dig out and link as well. But yeah, check that stuff out and try to make a fight scene. It doesn't have to be super elaborate. It can be something playful and silly and small. It can be just like a punch or two or something like that. But try to play with it and have fun. That's the main thing. You can try maybe vibing and like you can maybe even rip off some of the actions that are happening in storyboards like this that you like. Just try to steal it. Just restage it. Have the characters in slightly different positions. Maybe have the camera in a different spot, but have it doing basically the kind of the same thing. Of maybe not something this elaborate if you're just really beginner, but yeah, like getting back into this stuff. So what I want to make a note of here is the problem solving that went into this. There was definitely an arc used for this, for figuring out where this thing would swing around in perspective. So you get like, story artist might have done something like this. And they of course are keeping in mind the perspective of the scene and so on. I think it's following. Yeah, what's really cool is like I really love this scene for they're just using like simple lines and stuff to describe these really complex things that are happening. That are going to be way more complex when they're actually animated. Like the line here gets terminated and changes direction because it's it's starting to wrap around Donatello's pole. So in effect, like this line is stopping here, but then this becomes the new focal point of a new arc. It's going to be traveling here. I mean, this looks scary and intimidating, but it's really not. I mean, if you have an ellipse drawn in space to kind of guide you, and you kind of know that like, oh, it goes further. When it goes further back, it's going to get smaller. When it gets closer, it's going to get bigger. You can kind of figure that out, and then you get this kind of. It's very much what is happening is like a swing ball volleyball game. Right here. And I appreciate how the storyboard artist chose to draw this moment, like just before the weapon makes contact with this character. Like they're raising up, getting ready to attack Donatello, and then BAM! And there's this recoil here of the rope or the chain or whatever that is. And the bad guy actually like stretches out off the frame for how quickly he gets knocked off, and it's just like really, really rough and loose. Oof. I can't be sure, but I think it looks like they're fighting like evil versions of the Turtles or something. To see this episode again, I can see this episode in context. But I like how even though all I'm doing is just like tracing over this stuff and like adding little additional elaborations on it, it looks kind of neat even when you fast forward through it with the doodles I did on top of it. That's why I love analyzing stuff like this, because you kind of get keyed into like the sense of fun and dynamic action. Like you're going to be problem solving really tough stuff if you become an action board artist, or you want to become an action board artist. There's stuff that's going to make your hair pull out, make you want to pull your hair out. But if you can hold on to that spark, that essential spark that makes action scenes fun and interesting to look at and creative and cool, that's something that they can't teach. That's coming straight from you. And what I hope to push people in the direction of by encouraging them to do studies like these and then vibing with it for their own work is to kind of like vibe with the fun that other artists put into their work, the energy that they put into their work. Like the cool ass stuff that the storyboard artists on Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did to work out and solve these problems, but this freaking looks like it was a good time to make. It looks like when they showed this to the director was like, wow, that's so fun, or something, and for a lot of these. And I want people to kind of key into that, to like put more soul and fun into their boards, even if they're not necessarily doing action like this. Like they might be doing like dialogue, like really sensitive dialogue scenes or something that are just really interpersonal and meaningful, and that might be where you get the sense of passion for your work versus like dynamic fight scenes and stuff, almost like operatic fight scenes like this. So I want people to kind of play with these rules, analyze other people's work, and try to integrate your own passion into what you do. Practice your fundamentals. Pay attention to how these guys used their fundamentals. They used the rules of perspective. They used the rules of figure drawing. They used rules of storyboarding, of staging, of composition, of shot language. It's like watching a skateboarder who knows how to do a lot of really basic things that once they interlink together can turn into like really, really elaborate tricks. And they've done this so much and so dynamically, and they're so used to doing those basics that they get into they can get into kind of a vibing flow state sometimes, where they get in the zone and they're able to get some really, really cool shit out of what they're doing. I'd be interested in hearing from some of the story artists who worked on these shows. Like, what points in these shows, like, did you feel like you were really in the zone on this shot or that shot? Like, you also might hear some stories about, like, yeah, I was really in the zone on this particular shot, but then it got thrown out by the director. There's stories like that, and that's why you can't be precious with your drawings if you're a story artist, or even for your own films. It's healthy to do that. It's healthy to have that mindset for your own films too. You want to keep in mind that your work on productions like this is not precious. It can be thrown out at a moment's notice and replaced with something else. And so that's why, for the purposes of stuff like this, you need to come up with really intuitive shorthand, sort of like what these guys are using here, to describe what's going on without overdrawing it. You get good at this stuff, and it's a lot like music. If you've ever seen songwriters when they're in documentaries, when they're composing their work and stuff, there's a lot of like abstract experimentation that happens, and like playing with stuff as they're putting the songs together. And those are coming from people who are very skilled musicians who understand the rules of musical composition and all kinds of other things about music. It's the same way for animation. It's the same way for storyboarding and filmmaking. And you don't have to be scared of it. As long as you keep trying to make progress on your fundamentals and hitting your fundamentals of drawing, from perspective to figure drawing to everything else. As long as you're hitting your fundamentals of filmmaking, of analyzing, understanding film, like how cuts work, how shots work, and paying attention to existing films and existing animation, and of course paying attention to real life, where you can get reference or ideas for how to solve problems from. If you start building that knowledge and mileage base of putting this stuff together bit by bit, you can achieve this level of storyboarding someday. That's what I want to do. That's why I'm doing this. I'm teaching this class because I want to get better at this stuff. I want to understand this stuff. I'm a student the same as all of you guys here. This stuff excites me and interests me. So I want to pay more attention to it. I want to learn more from it. I want to vibe with what's going on in it. And if this interests you guys too, we can probably continue doing stuff like this and just build upon what we're doing here in more elaborate ways and move on to maybe making more of our boards in the future. But what I'm looking at right now for the next semester of classes, I currently have been looking at mainly doing figure drawing. Figure drawing, animal drawing, gesture drawing of figures, and head drawing. But I'm starting to kind of re-examine it. Like, this is essentially what would amount to like our last week of this class, of the last 6 weeks that I've been teaching this. And I want to kind of like maybe take a little bit of a break time to kind of reevaluate things, set up some new classes that initially I thought would be good to just have them be drawing classes, because the way I've been running them is I've been doing kind of like timed figure poses and head poses and stuff like that. After I teach the principles of what we're drawing. Like this last Monday, we did studies of a head sculpture by a painter, John Asaro, who made this like planar head that we studied. And we did a 25-minute. Here, I'll show it to you real quick. John Asaro head. So this one, I'm currently saving up money with the donations I get through. Doing these classes to buy one of these things. But this is what we were studying this Monday, and we're doing 25-minute studies of the head from different angles to understand the planes of the head a little better. I did something like that again on Wednesday with timed gesture drawing poses for like a gesture figure drawing. And I did something a little bit along those lines let's see, on another previous session. But the direction I'm thinking I want to move my classes in will be more about like showing a principle and then having people do it. And I need to think about more on how I'm gonna set that up. In addition to that, I want to keep animating and making storyboards and stuff of my own. So to that end, I'm going to encourage people to hang out more often in the Animator Corner, in our Animator Corner voice chat, in our Discord, which is right here on screen. I'm going to be, over the next week or so, I'm going to be hanging out there an awful lot, and I'm basically putting together what amounts to a animator peer pressure group, where people who want to be animators or story artists should come and hang out in the Animator Corner together, and we will encourage each other to keep at it with animation. Like, if we're going to be doing the Anna Morning Challenge thing, which I'm strongly considering doing this week. Definitely after watching tomorrow's thing with Doig and Swifty. Like, I'll be hanging out in there and doing stuff. I'll be hanging out there also to give like critique on animation or storyboarding or just drawing issues or whatever. Be happy to give people input. Encourage, you mean peer pressure each other. I mean positive peer pressure, not negative peer pressure. Like positive peer pressure, like the kind that helps people get over their anxieties about stuff. Like if you are having a hard time staying motivated, come in and hang out in the Animator Corner with us. And tell us that you're struggling with motivation. We can help you. Everyone struggles with motivation. I struggle with motivation. That's why I'm putting this little group together. So yeah, come out and hang out in the Animator Corner more often this week. I'll be continually encouraging people to come in there. We also frequently have animator pros from the industry that come in and hang there a lot that you can ask questions of. I have a short film project and we're gonna... Cool, yeah, feel free to share it. I can take a peek if you are comfortable sharing during classroom chat. We can take a look at it right now if you'd like. Chaos the Nerd. Nathan. My name's not Nathan. But what did you do when multiple subjects excited you at the same time? I'm getting into industrial design at the moment, but I also want to draw something totally different like creatures. I have good news for you. There's a lot of people that are interested in more than one discipline who become artists in the industry. In fact, your industrial design thing reminded me, one of my favorite manga artists, Tsutomu Nihei, this guy, who I'm going to put on screen right now. He originally started before he became a manga artist, he started as an architect. You can kind of see that influence in some of his work because a lot of it has like these really elaborately drawn structures and environments. His style has actually evolved a lot over the years, but he does a lot of kind of H.R. Geiger, M.C. Escher-ish looking stuff with like elaborate mega structures and so on. Tremendous amount of like a sense of atmosphere in his world building. But he started off as like an architect, and his knowledge of architecture went heavily into the worlds he creates, or still goes into it. It's a tremendous sense of space and scale in his work that you really have to read it to to fully take it in. So I strongly recommend checking him out for sure. And of course, let's not forget. Would it surprise you if I told you that Junji Ito, before he became a manga artist, was a dental technician? Yeah. So I mean, like, bits and pieces of like other disciplines can go into your work. And if you like creatures and industrial design, I mean, look at what I just showed you on Nihei's work. Like the stuff that he draws, for example, that's a mixture of biological creatures and mechanical creatures. Industrial design combined with creatures can be very interesting in concept art, or coming up with your own worlds or your own designs and things. If you're passionate about multiple subjects, you should try to become kind of a Renaissance man or woman about being passionate about stuff. And it's totally okay to be passionate about things that aren't even art related if you're an artist. Go with whatever you're passionate about. If you have a career path you're trying to discipline yourself into, though, like I am going to be an artist, but I'm also passionate about X, Y, Z, find a way to partition that out and pace it, I would say. Because I still have video games, but I want to play video games, and I want to work in the games industry eventually. But I can't play too many video games throughout the week. I have to partition when I do those. But yeah, what you're talking about is something that a lot of people go through. And if you talk about with more than just me, like people who've gone even specific, you can find people who've specifically gone through what you've gone through with those subjects. You'd be surprised how common I've actually heard of concept artists and other similar disciplines that started off in industrial design, believe it or not. Like just talk to other people, and there's plenty of people in this Discord you can ask those questions of. Do you recommend a page of dynamic poses like this? Some stuff. Let me see here. There's the Mike Matisse Force book. Let's see. So here's Mike Matisse. He's got a website. You have to be careful with here because there might be some nudes here. But you can check out his book and also the videos that are of his YouTube page of him and his students and his teaching assistants teaching this approach to drawing. I'm going to be getting more into this method of drawing in the future on my Wednesday classes. At 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, we'll be studying like gesture drawing and story-driven drawing. I haven't gone into Mike Matisse yet, but I have studied some of him. So some of his influence goes into the way I approach drawing. But I definitely want, it's on the horizon in the future to really dig more into the way he approaches the figure. And he's really, really good for really dynamic figure drawing. There's other sources too, and I'll bring those up in the future too during my Wednesday class. We're almost out of time here. I'm going to give a quick plug to my Ko-fi donation page before I head out. Maybe answer a couple more questions on my way out. But I'm currently working towards a $120 goal right now of getting in the Sorrow head, which was the that head drawing tool for my Monday head drawing class. Should be a huge help. I want to get in the Sorrow head so I can physically study it here, and so I can photograph it for my online classes. You can actually order, and I strongly recommend ordering one of these for yourself. Planes of the Head. It's from planesofthehead.com. John Asaro is the creator of, is a painter, fine art painter who created this, Originally back in like the 1970s he created this, but it's still in use today by tons of art schools. $115. Comes with a little booklet and stuff on breaking down its forms. But it's an essential drawing tool, and you can also use Sketchfab. I have a Sketchfab folder. Let's see here, collections. I have a folder I'm going to share in chat real quick that includes a few 3D models of the Asaro head in here that you can download, and either download or you can use it direct. Oh, in this case, this one costs $15, but some of the others I think are free to download. But even if you don't download it, you can still like rotate it in the app itself and do drawing practice from it. But anyway, I'm planning on getting a physical version of this so I can study it in real life, traditionally, and that will help me as a teaching tool and my students who are taking my free Monday classes. So that's my current donation goal right here. If you would like to help contribute to that, you can send donation there. And after this donation is finished, I've got other goals ahead for my other classes of other tools that I'm going to need and use. So I'll link my coffee in chats. Oh yeah, thank you. I almost forgot about the Sketchfab folder. I copy-pasted it and then I forgot to link it in chats. I'll do that too, because I'm going to be continually growing this little collection of tools for the various classes I teach, and these are really helpful. Like there are going to be some figure ones that are going to... Actually, this is just a head drawing reference folder, so there's going to be maybe a separate one for figures. But yeah. I'll link the Sketchfab collection here and here. Do you think grease pencils or dummies in its uses workshop would be... is that talking about the Blender grease pencil? Possibly. I'm actually planning on building a PC this weekend when my motherboard arrives. A 3900X build that I'm going to be doing Blender stuff in. When I start getting more into Blender, I'm actually going to be maybe streaming some stuff of what I've learned about how to use Blender as well too. So I'll maybe like do some Blender animation crash course type stuff. So yeah, let me see if there's any additional stuff. But yeah, like I said, every little bit helps. Extra money that goes over the donation goal just be rolled into the next thing that's going to help me run my classes better. But yeah. Please Blender tutorials. Yeah. Well, I'll get to those once I learn how to use Blender better. I'll share them, and we can talk about them more in the animation corner too when we're trying to hunt them down. I found some, but I haven't dug through them, so we might like dig through some of them together. Hey guys, I'm back. What is homework? Homework is let's see, where does that link? Homework is two things. Homework is I want you to participate in this if you can. You don't even necessarily have to turn this in, though. But turn this in there though. But because they have already like a lot of people and they can't necessarily get to everyone who submits. But use this as a pretext for what you're going to do for this week's homework. I want you to storyboard an animatic fight scene. You can do whatever you want with it. Take a look at some of the Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff for inspiration, or anything else you can find from other action shows that might help you key into some of the ideas in them. And in addition to that, I want you to follow these guys' Twitter account. And tomorrow, Sunday, their Twitch also. I want you to follow their Twitch. Here, I'll put that in chat too. I want you to also follow their Twitch, which is here, because tomorrow they are going to be streaming something cool with Powerhouse Animation director Patrick Stannard, where they're going to be talking about Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles stuff, because they all of them are big fans of what Fly and Bark has done, and they want to nerd out over it. And there's going to be some really skilled people there, including themselves, who you will be able to ask questions of and learn from. It should be really fun. But that's going to be tomorrow, I think. I'm not sure what time, but just pay attention. It should be somewhere around, I want to say noon or 10 a.m. in the morning, something like that. They might announce it beforehand on their Twitter. But that's going to be going on sometime. It's optional to attend that. And it probably will be on Twitch replay later if you miss it in their channel. But the main thing I want people to do this week is to storyboard a fight scene, a fight sequence, a fight scene. You can make it as elaborate or as simple as you want. That one to check out to learn Blender with Vongling's Blender setup. Due to it being more friendly towards visual developers and artists, it relies on keyboard shortcuts and screen gizmos. But I'd recommend doing that after the very basics of Blender Vanilla. Yeah, I'm reasonably along in Blender Vanilla, but I might need a little refresh before I get into it again. So yeah, I'll definitely check that out. But yeah, I'll be hanging out in the Animator Corner more throughout the week, and we can take a look at Blender stuff some more, because I want to get more fluent in that, for sure. Especially after I build my computer. I hope that the motherboard is supposed to be arriving today, so hopefully I'll get that taken care of. But anyway, I'll be wrapping this up shortly, so hope you all had a good time. I did. I'd be interested in seeing what kind of studies you did out of what we did today too. But yeah, like I said, I'm going to be restructuring things for my board and for my classes, and I'm going to be figuring out how to do more structured versions of this kind of class in the future. But so stay tuned in this Discord for updates. There will be more stuff on that. For the time being, thank you all for coming, and congratulations, you made it to the end of this session.
Congratulations. Thank you all.